Preface. First, I want to thank the readers for starting to read my book. Somehow it got your attention despite the daily tsunami of information, infotainment and entertainment that is thrown at you. Most of us are pressed for time, even in months of lockdown because of COVID-19, so I will keep this introduction short. I will do without the usual clever well-worded academic introduction, referring to Aristotle, Popper and Foucault. I will go straight to the relevant question any reader from academia, public or policy could ask with no need to be ashamed of. Why a book about open science? It is a hype, isn't it? So, is there not a lot already written about it? Okay, it is a big thing in Europe, Australia, and even China it seems, but what about the USA and Canada, and are the Germans really in? I do recall, in the USA during the Obama administrations there was some action of open access and open data, and academics who started DORA in 2012 in San Francisco. Or, a book about open science? Open access you mean? Does that start again? Wasn't that the movement that, since the year 2000 had a few starts already, sympathetic but that just didn't take off? Does the EU still believe in it? Really? Why? In this book I address these questions, without any beating around the bush. It is truly amazing, that a way to do science and research, that for the majority of its practitioners and the public and policymakers makes a lot of sense, and which has been around for quite some time, has not been embraced to become common practice. To answer this question, we have to delve deep into the science of science and research. We have to understand the idea of science, that does exist in the plural. We have to analyze why in particular one of these concepts and its corresponding public image has been dominant practically since 1945 and what that has done to science and scientists. That philosophical, sociological idea has been the basis for the ideologic narrative with which science has been internally organized and is being used to claim a unique position, authority and funding for science. With this narrative, the scientific community promised that science would be there to the benefit of society, at least when her autonomy and neutrality are respected. How come that although this legendary image and its narrative by the philosophers, historians and sociologists has no philosophical and timeless foundation, scientists apparently without knowing this demise of their legend keep using that narrative? It may well be the fear, the insecurity that comes with the awareness that knowledge production in science is based not on a given metaphysical foundation, but rests on a firm social process of a community of inquirers that relentlessly criticize, question, debate what the best knowledge claims are. Knowing very well that the consensus reached may work well but is never absolute and may be replaced by better ones by this same process of inquiry called science. Having said this, we realize that, despite the commonly held views, the method of the hard sciences and that of the soft social science and humanities may not be all that different after all. In our present-day world of hypermodernity, where knowledge is everywhere to be found and always contested by some, the process of the production of knowledge cannot be insulated from potential users and interested critical other parties. Clinging to the idea of a unique method for absolute truth and a foundation for science is understandable but a wrong reflex in debates with the public about its problems. Explaining how science really works and produces knowledge would be the best response. In this book, I and you readers need to be totally frank about science, and we need to be biting the bullet and bringing up several difficult issues. We need to discuss therapeutic interventions required to opening up research and academia for transition to a more open science that works better for the world. You may wonder, is the relationship with the public then the problem? It sure is, since I believe, with many colleagues, that scientists have a moral obligation to engage with the major societal problems and challenges of their time. I may seem very optimistic, but I am not naive, to think that the practice of open science will be a major improvement regarding the relationship between science and society in several critical ways. In contrast to the critical questions, it appears that since 2016 the idea of open science has been adopted by many institutions and governments around the world, and it is well possible that we have passed the tipping point of its global breakthrough. Life is never perfect, and as we know open science to function properly needs an open society. But this requirement is not universally fulfilled and needs the attention of academia. I clearly see an opportunity for a leading role of the open science approach of the EU. Now the USA has lost a lot of its position as a world leader in science. I have touched upon the problem of geopolitics, for instance in relation to China, the new science superpower. As this is not specific for science but a general problem of democracy, it is outside the scope of this book. The good news is that in the heat of the catastrophic COVID-19 pandemic, with its unprecedented global threat to public health and our socio-economic life, we see the opening up of the different practices of science, publishing, data and biomaterial sharing, and doing research and in real time opening up to public, at national and international levels. It is argued here that science should always be done like that, as open science. My journey. This book results from my journey in science since the early 1970s. I had the opportunity of being at the bench of biochemistry laboratories of different knowledge institutions. In the Netherlands at the National Institute for Public Health and the Environment, the nonprofit Blood Supply Foundation and 2 university medical centers, with a 6-month sabbatical, in 1994 at DNAX Research Institute, Palo Alto, California. From 1975 on, I was intrigued by the social aspects of science. While in my academic development I discovered the practice of research, in parallel I discovered the science of science and developed an interest as a science observer. Ever since, while being totally engaged in research, at the same time I was a science observer and obsessively studied the many aspects of that social game called science. It is this dual experience and the broad view of science that has led to my writings and actions to improve science, of which this book gives witness, reporting from both tracks of my journey in science. Finally, I have provided a broad and, in some cases, an in-depth background analysis of different aspects of science. Importantly, regarding the images of science that still distort our image and practice of science, most writers about the practice of science mention the problem, but almost all refrain from such in-depth analysis. Almost all stay even further away from the directly connected discussion of the incentive and reward systems, because that unavoidably opens the black box, or rather the can of worms of academic politics, the game of reputation, power and money. Since, as I argue in Chapter 2, I believe that the obsolete philosophy and public image of science are the major cause of many problems in the practice of science, I went all out to present the major different arguments for the lack of foundation for the methods of empirical positivism and its analytical foundational philosophy. I also dwell on the analyses of the problems of the practice of science in academia, since I do regard this in many ways an important and necessary step for the transition to open science. Finally, there is a lengthy description of the development, from early initiatives to finally the institutional start of open science in the research agenda of the European Union. I realize that most of you shall want to read selectively according to your main immediate interests. Therefore, I provide 4 distinct reading tracks below. 4 recommended reading tracks. O. For the general concise view of science and society since 1945. Chapter 1. 1. Philosophy and Sociology. If you are more interested and have read in the philosophical and sociological origins of our current ideas about science, Chapters 2 and 4 will be serious reading but are highly recommended. 2. A Critique of Science. If you want to grasp the more recent critical thinking about science, with analyses and arguments in the pre-open science time, then go for Chapters 1, 3 and 6. 3. New Avenues. If you don't want the diagnosis, but rather read about attempts and ideas how, by engaging with society, to improve the relationship of science with society, that is to be found in Chapters 5, 6 and 7. 4. Transition to Open Science. If you want an impression about early actions in the past 20 years and the more recent actions taken to promote open science, go to Chapters 5 and 7, and for some of the local initiatives in Utrecht, I refer to Chapter 6. Utrecht, the Netherlands. Frank Miedema.